Hi, welcome. Just double checking that we're live and ready to go. Come on, LinkedIn, refresh.
Get our people here.
There we are. Nice. How's everybody doing today? If you're here, please write us a comment. Tanita and I can see it as it comes up in the chat. Yeah, that's live. Cool. Okay. Well, let's get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome. We're absolutely thrilled to have you all here today as part of the Marketing as a Force for Good community. Hi, Alicia. It's nice to have you here. If you're a marketer, creative, or communicator who believes your skills, our skills, can be used as a powerful force for change, then you are in the right place. We're happy to have you in the community today. So, to get us started, let's talk a little bit about who we are at Content for Good & Co. and Marketing as a Force for Good, our community. So, Content for Good & Co. is actually a media organization, and we're dedicated to bringing our industry's change makers, like Tanita with us today, under one digital roof to create mass collective change in our industry. As part of the work that we do, we host the MFFG community as a digital space to dedicate to exploring how marketing can be used to create real positive social and environmental impact. So today I have with me Tanita, and I'm going to bring her. She's already on stage. And she's going to unmute herself in a second and say hi, but she's going to be talking to us today about the evolution of circular watching. And I'm really excited about this topic because I think it's absolutely fitting. I don't know, and when we were putting together this topic, that we realized that this week is actually Black Friday week. And we're going into the intensity of what is overconsumption and like Uber capitalism going into the holidays. So I think it's really fitting and the right time of the year for us conscious marketers, where we might be feeling a little extra concerns and worried about kind of what our industry is doing to the world and how it's making people feel with, like what I say, like the feeling of unsustainable consumption on a planet with finite resources, or just making people feel a little bit less happy and that the stuff is going to fulfill those gaps. And I ran by a really interesting statistic the other day that I think is really going to kind of help drive home the conversation we'll have. And I don't think people realize, but like marketers and communicators and everything that we do during this time of the year to drive consumption, 80% of all the products that we actually put out into the world during Black Friday and that we're promoting and pushing actually ends up in the waste fields by the end of the year, or within a year, within 1 year. So I think that just tells you the importance of what we're doing and the impact that it's happening, but also, for example, Tanita's topic and why it's so important to incorporating the circular economy into how we're doing marketing and communication, but also as an industry as whole, in our sustainability movement. So let's get into this like circular economy topic. So where does it stand within all of this? So we've been known, many of us have known this concept for, maybe you're familiar with it, maybe you're not. But a lot of times this concept is talked about the challenge, the concept that will just basically solve all our challenges. I don't know if it's like been represented to you in that way, but as long as business as usual continues kind of to be this like fundamental driver of how we operate as a society, circular economy, how will it actually change and adopt, and would it be able to do that, and will it be able to do it in an authentic and a non-greenwashing way? So there's a lot of things to digest and kind of break apart today with Tanita, but let's go ahead and bring her to the stage fully. And let's remove it. Hi.
Hi, everyone. So good to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to have you here. So a little bit about Tanita. I don't know if you know Tanita Hecking. So she is the head of content at Studio MM04, and she's the co-founder and editor of The Crisps. And The Crisps is a newsletter dedicated to anti-greenwashing and honest fashion communication. I actually found The Crisps, I think, over a year ago now, and it was such great writing. I loved it. So that's how we originally were connected. So let's jump right into it. How do you feel right now, Tanita?
Oh, very good. Very excited. And I hope everybody else is also in a good mood today.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Let us know in the chat if how you're feeling today. Tanita and I were just talking about the gloomy Berlin weather. So let us know how you feel.
Dark, dark, cold, gray Berlin.
Yes, but the sun is there. Great. Okay, so let's switching over to circularity and circular washing. So circularity has been rather a longer story in the fashion industry, if you were to ask my opinion. With its first conception as early as 2012 during a ThreadUp's resale marketing report. That's when the word was kind of first conceived. So Tanita, from that first conception of 2012, why do you think circularity hasn't lived up to its name in the industry over the last 10 plus years? And where do you think it is falling short?
Yeah, I think if we look at kind of the last years or ever since circularity has become this kind of solution, or at least it's been touted as the solution to a lot of the problems in our industry is facing. One fundamental problem that we have is that we are trying to force products for a circular system into a linear business model. And we will talk about this in a little bit in more detail, but I think that really comes down to this one key problem. So everything that we're doing or how the circular business model and circular products have been advertised in the past is always as kind of an attribute to a product, but a product can actually not really be circular, but circularity is a system within where products circle. So I think that's super important to understand also in the beginning when we start talking about this topic. That's incredibly hard to put a product into a system that's just not made for being reused, recycled, repaired, but actually ends up as waste. And we will talk about this in a bit in more detail.
Yes, it's such a great point that you made there, because I've been thinking, like I just said before we started our conversation, is it's been around for a while. And if I think back, like even these circular and buyback clothing programs specifically, I've been seeing them, 10 years ago, even from H&M and Zara. So kind of what is because I think that's just a prime example of what we think the circular economy is operating within the fashion industry, like the everyday person might think, do you think these programs have lived up to their potential? And if not, why?
No. Surprising answer. No, they definitely haven't. And I think that really comes down to the topic also being used as a communication benefit by a lot of the brands without actually doing the work behind it and without really creating meaningful change, let's say that, on a systemic level, and really going more, just promising the solution of we're closing the loop because you give us your products back or you give us clothes back. And what actually is happening, and there's been a really extensive investigation by the Changing Markets Foundation. That's a really good resource to look into if you're interested in this topic in general and also in the fashion and environmental space. And they've investigated take-back schemes by brands to see where the products actually end up and what happens to them. And what happens is that most of them, or a major portion of them, really gets downcycled, dumped, or destroyed, or ends up in warehouses for months and months, and they're not really being used, even though they're still in great condition, or they're being exported to countries, and a lot of them also in Africa, for example, where they end up as waste, and also where it's really forcing the infrastructure in these countries to be just overwhelmed by pretty much the waste that we're exporting. And there's a lot of discussions and legal legislation changes and things happening, but still the amount of just products that are really shipped to faraway countries to kind of deal with our problems or the things that we're not using anymore is a really, really big problem. So no, if if you're just asking me for if they have actually done any meaningful benefit, then definitely not, no.
So we could definitely say that they have contributed to more harm than they have to good over the last 10 plus years. And that anything to add on why maybe they're not continuing to, these programs, how they were created, aren't actually fundamentally helping the systematic change that we need in the industry, and how it's not even scratching the surface on
Yeah,
that.
I think that also comes down to the entire issue of overproduction and overconsumption. And I mean, that's always the big elephant in the room. Also, when you go to conferences and stuff, and no one really wants to talk about this problem in a lot of detail. And brands don't really want to talk about the amounts of products that they're actually putting out on the market. So they're not really disclosing super transparently how many products they produce. And yeah, I think that one of the things for consumers, at least, is also that you might feel like you're actually doing something good by donating your clothes, for example, if you don't wear them anymore, or but in the end, you actually end up buying the exact amounts of products and clothes as you have in the past years, or it's actually giving you kind of this rebound effect of you actually feel like you're doing something good, but you're not really changing anything about the kind of root cause. And I mean, that is still that we just produce way too many clothes that oftentimes are also not even sold completely, and then still end up as waste or incinerated, or using resources that we don't actually have, or at least not in the long run anymore.
Yep, that's definitely the bigger problem that we're not addressing. If we go really quick back to the circular economy, I think it might also help our audience a little bit to clearly define also the difference between circular economy and linear economy, maybe in your own words, because a lot of the people who are tuning in are also marketers and communicators. So how would you explain the circular economy to a communicator?
Sorry. I think maybe we actually pull up already the little image I brought with me today, because I think if we talk about the difference between like the linear economy and the circular economy, it's always good to have a little visual with it as well, even though the right one, I have to say, is still, it's super complex, the topic in itself. So this image is very basic. There's a lot of small different circles and stuff missing, but so essentially in the linear economy, what happens is you take resources, you make a product, the product is being used, and then the product is being disposed of. So you have the production, the use phase, the disposal phase, and in the disposal, it ends up as waste or as being exported, and then someone else has to deal with it. In the circular economy, the promise, or at least the hope, is that you actually make a product, it's being used, then usually there's also a little circle again where it's being repaired, for example, so it can be used again. So this is also another little thing that's missing in this image. And then as soon as you can't really reuse it anymore, repair it anymore, it can get collected, it can be transformed into new textiles, for example, or new other products, and then it can be reused again. So in the circular economy, you actually don't have this typical end-of-life scenario, because you try to design this out of the system and out of the product. And you try to design a product so that it is able to cycle within the circular economy and the system. But it's incredibly hard, of course, to do. Also, if you look at the difference between just the two, how the different steps are connected, it also comes down to the supply chain that has to be completely revamped for the circular economy in terms of compared to how it works in the linear economy. And you have to implement a lot of things. And when we look at, for example, recycling, which is a lot of times one of the biggest areas that people talk about when we talk about the circular economy, even though that's really one of the last steps that happens, actually, because you always try to keep the value within the product, so at this use phase. But then if it goes down to transform, which would be the recycling stage, there's lots of different options to do that, mechanical and chemical recycling. But their products actually don't get recycled into new textiles. So it's only 1 to 2%. I think it's even still 1. I have to check it again, because this number was a little bit older that I found. But I don't know how it is exactly this year, but definitely the latest number I found was still 1% that's being transformed from textile to textiles. So yeah, a lot of the textiles don't get recycled into actual new textiles again, but get downcycled into other products, and not really used within the cycle again.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, because I think also circular economy, in my opinion, there's a lot of potential to it, but there's also been a bit of a buzzword around it. A lot of people latch onto it, that it's the latest and greatest thing, which there's a lot of potential there. But in that regard, because there's been so much hype around it, it's also gotten us into instances where marketers and communicators are asked to talk about the Take Back program or circular economy related programs within a fashion company like H&M, and then they find themselves in hot water. So maybe this point is a good time for us to kind of shift our focus and thoughts into, okay, marketers and communicators that are swimming in all these circular buzzwords. So there are a lot of them. I'll just name a couple right now that you might be familiar with, like circular, zero waste, recycled. How do you think all these buzzwords, Tanita, are adding to the continued confusion and also greenwashing of the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think that applies to pretty much all of the also environmental claims that are circulating, like environmentally friendly, or all of these other phrases that are more misleading than they actually do any good. So they contribute definitely, because I think they sometimes display or try to display a situation where customers then feel like they're actually buying into something better. They're actually contributing positively to change, or to buy into kind of future-oriented systems and stuff. But in the end, the action is lacking behind the claim. And I think that's one of the main key things I see here.
Yep. And maybe we just pull out one, like the most used in the industry. Like, for example, what about like recycled, or it's recyclable? I know that
recyclable.
I
I think the recyclable is actually a good one, because I mean, if something is recycled and you have a portion of a material that's recycled in your product that's super valuable and really good, but then the change had already has happened. So you actually hopefully really have sourced materials that have been recycled. But if you claim your product is recyclable, then that essentially means in theory it's recyclable, but what's on the practical side? So how do you as a company contribute to actually making this possible? Do you have an infrastructure in place where you're actually doing that? Are you piloting with other companies or collaborating with other companies to find solutions? And I think if you only advertise your product as being recyclable in theory because you have created a product that is made from monomaterials, then it does not really do much on the practical action side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I'm also, what you're saying, I think, is very interesting. And I'm trying to think of it as like a marketer communicator too, because why do you think marketers and communicators who are sitting within these companies aren't making the right communication decisions, and they are falling to the greenwashing, the circular washing trap with these type of buzzwords? Like what do you think is the pitfalls for them?
I think there are a lot of pitfalls. And I mean, I also totally get it because I mean, I'm also writing content for brands and also, trying my best to find a balance. And I know that the line is very fine between trying to do storytelling in a way that's engaging and fun and sounds great, and then also really sticking to this more technical phrasing that you sometimes need to explain what really happens or what really is associated with those terms. But I think that sometimes you just, you have to be super precise. So you try to really push knowledge into a few words or sentences, and definitely also just if certain phrases, like for example circular products, like circular denim or circular, I don't know, t-shirts or whatever, if certain phrases are already kind of in the sphere and people understand at least the rough concept that's behind it, I mean, that also helps brands to communicate, of course, but I think you just have to be super, super careful that you're actually holding up to the things that you promise. So every claim really should be rooted in things that the company is actually doing, and just not overstating and over exaggerating what action and impacts your work and your products are actually having.
Yeah. Is this a good moment to pull up circularity bingo?
I think so. We brought a little bullshit bingo. So excuse my language, but but I think that's actually quite fun just to talk about these 6 words because they are used a lot. Sorry if you hear my dog crying. He's crying next to me because he thinks now is a great time to go outside. But I hope we can ignore him. In the bingo, the 6 words, I think, or phrases are some that are just used quite a lot within the circularity sphere. And one of them, I mean, we already discussed the recycled or recyclable, so that that really should only be used if it's practically done and not just done theoretically, or not just possible in theory. The zero waste, for example, I think is also a great example because there are, I know, also great brands that really follow a super nice zero waste design framework. So they are trying to design out as much waste as they can. But in the end, we're producing new products. So first of all, you're using resources. So you have to be super careful about also the stages. If you're talking about zero waste principles that you do when the production is still happening, or if you're talking about the end of life, for example, so that there's no waste left because the product, for example, can be composted and then it's disappearing. But yeah, I think that's a very, very a term that you have to be extremely careful about using. Then the close the loop, I think All of you have probably heard or read this before, because that's always also connected to this take-back system or take-back initiatives. But there it's super important, if you see it, that you really question whether it has the impact that it's promising to have, because can one brand really close the loop? And if so, they have probably set up their own infrastructure to do so, and not just a take-back system where they then send the products off to other initiatives and other countries. Then if we talk about the circular, just as a term, as an kind of attribute to a product or a service. So like I said, circular jeans or circular denim or circular jacket, circular fashion also, just as an overarching term. Just repeating myself here, but circularity is not a product or a single service, but it's a system wherein products are designed to fit into that system. So I think that's just super important to always keep in mind. And then secondhand, I mean, that's one of the biggest trends also currently. Everybody's buying secondhand, and that's great. But there's also been, for example, a recent study or report. I can also send this over if you would be interested in further resources, if you want to read and dive into some of the topics deeper. But this recent report said that actually the secondhand market, or the general interest in secondhand clothes and shopping, is actually not reducing the amounts of products that you buy and that are produced new. So also something to question about. Are we just kind of sticking, like finding other excuses to buy as much as we have previously done, and just kind of trying to find ways to just feel better about our shopping habits, because then that fits in right here. And then the durability claim or word in general, I think, is also oftentimes used as an excuse, or kind of used as, we use fossil fuel-based materials because they're super durable. But then what happens in the end? If it's a material blend, for example, it's really hard to recycle and turn into new textiles. Also a word that has to be used very cautiously, and needs more explanation, definitely.
Yeah, it's a great list, because while you were talking, I was trying to think of experiences, just like going into, the shopping center, the department store. I don't shop at H&M, a not H&M store, and looking around and just trying to see like what people are putting up there. And I just thought of one time I went into a store here in Germany, and I think it was for a circular company, or like for a impact company. I never say the name right, so I will not say it live. But they had like a sign over all their products of their whole stack, and it said circular clothing. And then under that, they had a whole detail and explanation of what that meant. And that was just so eye-opening for me, because it was like, wow, okay, so this is, one, it's saying circular, but then it's explaining to me and giving me, the process and everything. So we'll have to share that in the chat later. I think I have to dig up that picture. But I see these things all the time, going shopping and then being in and looking for clothes or something. I'm curious what other people that are joining us live, they can write in the chat. Like, is there any other words that you have seen personally that aren't on this list, or maybe you have seen these words? So let us know. Drop it into the chat.
Super interested as well.
Yep. But I think this is a good moment for us to think about actually some examples, because, of course, just laying out some practical examples of what circular washing is and what it looks like in action, basically, for good action and bad action. So can you give us a few examples of what to watch out for and to avoid in our communication as
Mhm.
marketers and communicators when it comes to circular washing, and maybe throw in some nice examples in there too.
Yes. Let's maybe walk through the examples that I brought, and then I can share the full list in the end if that's okay, because then we can discuss this first. Yeah, I think that's maybe you've come across this Stan Smith advert. I mean, that's been quite heavily used as an example of greenwashing and just misleading brand communication. That was an advertisement from 2021. So it's been a few years, but still very, very accurate, and could still happen exactly this way today, I think. And they had advertised the Stan Smith Forever 100% iconic, 50% recycled, but missed to say actually that the 50% recycled didn't apply to the entire shoe, but just part of the shoe. So just overstating the percentage of the recycled material that's used in the product. And they've actually received a warning and penalty from the French GDP because, they were misleading the consumers with this advert. So also just in terms of legal consequences, I mean, the EU Green Claims Directive is not, I don't know, let's see what's happening with that, but at least paused for the moment, or no one is talking about it at the moment. So let's see what happens there. But there's still legal frameworks where just, consumer protection in terms of misleading communication and marketing. So I hope that, we all stick to the truth.
Yeah, maybe that's also another question. If anybody is interested in the audience, is I would be curious if anybody is familiar with the Green Claims Directive, if it's something like you've researched and you've known about. There's also another one, one that actually has passed within this like group
The MCO.
of the MCO. Thank you, which was on your latest CRISP newsletter piece. So that was so even if the Green Claims Directive isn't there, there is still regulation that you definitely within this whole sphere.
Exactly.
So one thing that really pointed out to me too in this example is 100%. As like a sustainable communicator, like anything 100%, I'm just like, nope, that's a bad.
I know, but it's sometimes very hard. It's sometimes very hard to convince people not to go into the 100% direction.
We don't live in a world where 100% is possible. It's crazy. Well, good. So your next example that I think was really good.
Exactly. So that's the M&S and H&M. They've both had take back bins for clothes in their stores, advertise them with phrases such as "let's close the loop" or "donate clothes you no longer wear" and give them a new lease of life. And I said this in the beginning already with the investigation from the Changing Markets Foundation. It's just written here again, so you can have a super short look. But bottom line is that take back bins don't close the loop, because if the brand is not really having an infrastructure in place themselves where it feeds back into kind of the production cycle, the effect in the end is that they will get more often downsized, dumped, or destroyed than actually doing anything meaningful.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I've seen one of these bins in a clothing store.
And I mean, it's not in general that, that's cannot be a good kind of cornerstone little action in the future when the system behind it is set up properly. So I think still like collecting clothes and taking care of them, it will be in the long run also a super essential part of the circular economy. But just at the moment, because the infrastructure is not in place, it doesn't have the effect as it would promise. So Also, for example, this give your clothes a new lease of life. I know that this second, third life is always such a nice idea, and I also, like this because it emotionalizes the communication, of course, a little bit, but still, in the way that it's set up here, it doesn't have the effect as promised, because not all of the clothes will get a second life. They will be, ending up in other places.
Yeah, no, very true. So these are two examples of what not to do, right? So the one
I think I brought
before.
one more. I brought one more. The Primark one. But just to have here like one more example of this, making our clothes circular for the world to keep turning. I mean, from a copywriting perspective, it's a little bit cheesy, but it's quite nice. But still, like, of course, from a sustainability communication perspective, it's you're not. Your clothes, first of all, they're not circular. You design clothes to be to feed into the circular system, and you design clothes for circularity, but you don't have circular clothes. And also the small byline underneath, by 2027, our clothes will be recyclable by design. Also just pretty much means translated that in theory they can be recycled, but what about the practical part? So I mentioned this a little bit earlier as well, but I think that it's just crucial that those adverts then don't necessarily mean that on the practical part there's a lot of things happening.
Yeah, I started looking at the image, and I don't know, it's like there's like leaves in the background.
Yeah, it's very
naturey, and then fulfilling the diversity quota. Who knows?
We can definitely talk a lot about all of the other things in this advertisement as well.
Yeah, it's just a good point, because I think as communicators like you and I, we always have to remember that it's not just the copy. So we focus a lot on the copy. It's everything. It's from the images to the visuals to the people you put in it. It all is part of the big bundle. Yeah. Okay, now are we ready for some good examples?
Exactly. So I brought two good examples, or at least better examples. I don't think that there's currently any perfect solution in copy out there, but I think Mud Jeans is doing a good job in terms of really explaining, because at least when they have phrases like, we managed to close our own loop, our jeans contain up to 55% post-consumer recycled denim, they at least really in detail explain what this means. So it's not just very vague and sounds super, super nice, but they're actually on a practical level saying what this means and what impact this has. And also the claim is really reflecting on the actions that the brand is taking. So also what I think is quite nice to know is that Mud Jeans is part of this working group, the Denim Deal, and they're really actively trying to build up supply chains to increase the amount of post-consumer recycled denim in the industry. So they're collaborating on solutions to find within the industry to make it actually possible from a quality perspective, so that the textiles on the material that you get out after you recycle denim and the post-consumer means that people have worn them, they have returned them, and then new material is getting produced out of these jeans. And I think that at least, you have communication around something that's actually happening and that actually has an impact. And that's always the key. For everything, like greenwashing, circular washing, social washing. I mean, that happens when you don't actually have the proof to say that those actions are in place.
Yeah, I think I also wanted to shoot it out to our audience, because I think it's a really great example. But if anybody else knows of any really cool examples that they've come by that they think is great examples of circular economy, circular marketing done right, please pop it into the chat. We'd like to hear about it too. So Tanita, mud jeans, the next one. I heard
The
that it's
next one.
one of your favorite.
So I have a disclaimer because the Sulk is the brand that we're also working with Studio MMO4. But I think they're doing a really, really fantastic job of, it's a super young brand, new to the market. They've actually just launched their web shop in October and have had just a pre-order phase before that. But I think the team is really doing a fantastic job of making products that can be compostable. So I think that's just in terms of the end of life. When you talk about the circular economy, there's two different ways to kind of have the cycle. So it's either the technical cycle where then products are transformed into new products again. So for example, recycling also feeds into that part of the circular economy. And then there's the biocircular cycle. And the biocircular cycle essentially means that products are composted at the end of the life. So they are being chomped up by little microbes and fungi and all of that and turned into soil in the end. And especially with a product such as sneakers that usually are made from fossil fuels, so polyester and all of that, and also glued together in most of the places. I think they're doing a really, really nice job trying to show that it also can be done differently. And they've worked with a direct supply chain partner on the material. So it's actually leather, but it's tanned in a way that is safe to be fed back into the earth. And they've done testing to really show that all of the materials have been tested and all of the kind of ecotox testings in the end, so that the soil really is great afterwards and not contaminated by chemicals that just don't belong in there. And we, or at least, of course, together with the team, just try to make sure that people understand that the composting is kind of the solution, at least for this product, and that the infrastructure is really in place because the brand also offers their own take back system. So they actually take back the shoes once they are completely destroyed, because of course you should wear them for a long time before. But then you can actually send them back to them and they will grind it up. So they have a grinder, they have this grinding machine, and they actually grind up the shoes and mix it with other things like horse manure, for example, and then also want to feed it into the what's it called, composting kind of facilities. So that's the long-term plan and goal, and I think that's a really, really, really cool product and just a vision for a usually very polluting part of our industry.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, just like the level of complexity that they've gone through in each individual piece. I'm curious, as a marketing communicator, how much are they actually communicating on the little pieces of that process and that vision that they're creating? And do you think they're doing anything specifically well that you would want to share?
I think just what's most important for me is that we try to really have them be super specific about all of the small changes that they're doing. So also, for example, the eglets at the end of the shoelaces, the little tips, they have this own manufacturing machine that they actually built for this part, so that this is really a detail that usually a few brands would probably just say, okay, we will deal with this later, or at some later at a later stage, but they really try to go down to every single detail about the product. And also in terms of the communication, that you're super, like, you skip all of the vague terms. We're not just saying they're doing circular shoes, but actually going down to the composting and telling what this means then in the end. So I think trying to be super specific while also keeping the copy short and sweet, is a way that we're dealing with it at the moment. And let's see how it develops. But definitely a brand, if you are interested in this space, check it out. They have 2 models and a lot of different colors, and I think it's a really good and nice innovation and product.
Yeah, sounds. So you have another example?
No, that's the 2, and that's the little wrap up in the end, where we can talk about the things that I have mentioned already, but just in terms of trying to, because I know how hard it is. Like I said, tea. Sorry, my dog's like, time to party, almost time to go outside, almost. That you really stick to claiming what you can prove. So super crucial, don't come up with anything just because it sounds nice or it looks nice on an image. Really stay and stick with the things that you can validate with data, with certifications, or also with the third-party testing. And if something is aspirational or in development, or you're at a stage where you're saying you're testing things out, you can also communicate that, but just make sure that you stick within with the truth and try to not overstate the impact that you're having, because also no one single brand will solve the problems of our industry. So I think it's very important that that you also acknowledge the limitations and just stick with credible infos. Then also be super specific, not vague, like I mentioned before. I would try to always avoid all of the terms like eco-friendly or circular. I mean, I understand why you would want to use it, but for me, it's more valuable if you actually explain what this means and how that is feeding into your product and the services that you offer, and what impacts that at the end really has. And then also the zero waste or green eco-friendly, I think, is also one of the terms that a lot of people are using. That should just be avoided. Or sustainability, I mean, also it's just your products are more sustainable. That in the end doesn't really tell the customer anything meaningful, because there's no definition for what that actually means. So also in terms of, sometimes I think when we're working in the space, we think that a lot of people know what's behind all of these terms, or what that could mean, and what kind of systems or changes in the industry that might be related to. But then in the end, there's so much that you have to explain. And then also you can, of course, discuss to how much detail you want to go on every single topic, and don't overboard them with generic claims. Rather focus on 1 or 2 super important, super specific things that you explain and point out that makes your product stand out in that sense. And then the last one that I think is also very, very important is that you don't use legal bare minimums as achievements. So in your communication, if you just meet the bare minimum of your legal legislation that is coming up, that's nothing to advertise. You're legally binded to do that. So you can, of course, always make sure that all of the efforts that you do that go beyond the legal minimum, that you advertise those. But please don't do it with the legal minimums, because every brand has to do that. So that's nothing that makes you stand out.
Yep, those are all very powerful statements. So this is bringing us to the end of our discussion today, Tanita. I think you have presented some really great examples and some really great takeaways for us to consider as marketers and communicators as we go forward. But to maybe wrap us up, and I'll bring us both onto the stage again together. If anybody has any questions, get them ready. Please pop them in the chat because we're going to get to them here in a second. But to kind of summarize our discussion today, for communicators who are working in the fashion industry, who are working with circular messaging, they want to avoid circular washing, kind of what is your top tips, your maybe 2 or 3 takeaways for them today to start making credible and honest claims?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I would stick with the 4 that I just mentioned. I think those are really, if you are honest about your communication, you don't blow it up, what you're actually doing, but you show also the benefits in terms of what it means for people individually and also how it feeds into a better, industry, economy. I think that's super valuable. And I know how hard it is. I also want to mention this again, because I mean, I'm also sometimes racking my brain about how do I get all of this now into a form that is engaging and fun and entertaining and has a good hook for an Instagram reel, or like all of these things that we have to keep in mind. But it doesn't provide any value to people if we overstate what the achievements actually are, and then not really helping the industry move forward. So, and I think what's also super important is that the communication is always coming as a second step. So you have to have things in place first that actually are done in a, let's say, better way. So the company actually has to do something that you then also can talk about. So don't just do it because there's a campaign coming up, or you're planning a campaign and you want to say something nice because you have, for example, this take back system, but then in the end there's nothing really feeding or coming after just the take back.
Yep. Cool. Well, thank you so much. I'm taking a look at the comments. Deborah just had a nice comment for us to say that she really enjoyed the conversation and the live discussions on LinkedIn. But I don't see any other questions at the moment, but I'm sure there will be other people like tuning in to the live session at a later date on LinkedIn. It's forever on LinkedIn. It's not going to disappear. It's also in the Substack community. So please drop your questions into the feed there and just reach out to Tanita too as a LinkedIn message and tag her. And we can continue the conversation. I think it's a really great place for us to start also digging into a topic that I think there is not a lot of people who understand what it is. So wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Tanita.
Thank you so much. And yeah, get in touch if you want to chat about just fashion sustainability and circularity washing.
Yep, that's a great reminder. Join the Crisps newsletter.
Join the Crisps, also good.
Fantastic newsletter, and definitely send out a connection request to Tanita on LinkedIn.
Nice. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone.